Marvel couple, director meets White Queen. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 1. The city of Mosa, United States. In a private estate of 500 square meters, Feng sat on the sofa, holding a cigar in his hand, looking at the snowy scene outside the floor-to-ceiling window, and curled the corners of his mouth. It was his 42nd day as the owner of this manor, and everything was as usual and pleasant. He feels lucky that because of an accident in his previous life, he came to this world called the Marvel Universe. Unlike the novels he read on the internet, on the first day he arrived at the Marvel Universe, he had nothing and encountered nothing, whether it's a system, or some kind of high technology, or a unique capability. But the only thing that made him feel lucky was that he had a wife named Emma, nicknamed the White Queen. Yes, it was the White Queen who nearly destroyed the X-Men. But at this stage, the White Queen has not fully awakened all mutant abilities. She is still a plump woman, with a convex front and a back, charming and attractive, withdrawn and indifferent nature. Of course, in the city of Mosa, the White Queen's family lineage is also very good, because she has a father who is known as the richest man in Mosa. And this 500 square meter manor is the wedding foil that her father gave to Feng. It's time to eat, sir. A young nanny wearing a maid's skirt came over and bowed to Feng. Good. Feng nodded slightly, extinguished his cigar, and walked to another living room. At the table, the White Queen in sexy pajamas is battling her delicate legs and tasting a fresh steak. After Feng sat down, she raised her willow eyebrows, smiled charmingly, and asked, "How did you sleep last night?" "Everything is fine." Feng smiled, not hiding his greedy eyes at all. "Of course, it would be better if you were with you." Hearing this, the White Queen couldn't help but roll her eyes and glared at Feng with disgust. "Eat your meal." That being said, the White Queen still thoughtfully picked up a piece of steak and gently put it on Feng's plate. "You're still going to the recording scene today, right? Do you need me to ask my father to arrange some bodyguards to accompany you?" Although his tone was cold, Feng could clearly hear the warmth in it. He curled the corners of his mouth, walked to the White Queen, put his arm around her waist, and said with a smile, "Look down on your husband and me so much. Isn't it to announce the trailer of Die Hard? Nothing to be nervous about. So when are you coming back? I want you to come with me to the board." The White Queen stared at Feng with those dark blue beautiful eyes, and asked lightly, "Probably around 9 o'clock tonight." Feng estimated it and responded with a smile. As for the trailer of Die Hard that he said, "Since you are a crosser, you can't achieve nothing and become a waste that only eats soft rice, right? Therefore, he can only be a second-rate director in the Marvel Universe to make some movies that have never appeared in this world." In addition to Die Hard, he even made the movies The Expendables 123, which became famous overnight. After all, these movies all exist in Feng's memories of his previous life, and he is simply handy to shoot. "I'll go to the hospital first to see my mother." Because the White Queen's mother often took psychotropic drugs, she was in poor physical condition and often needed to stay in the hospital for treatment. Therefore, the White Queen would generally go to the hospital to take care of her mother after eating with Feng every day. "Wait, dash." Feng suddenly hugged the White Queen's waist into his arms, and then looked at her affectionately. "You. What for?" The White Queen was taken aback. After 2 seconds, the four lips are facing each other. "Okay, there you go." Feng licked the corners of his mouth with a smile and let go of the White Queen's soft body. The latter's face rarely has a blush, which is more charming. After glaring at Feng fiercely, she turned around and changed her clothes and left. For Feng's domineering behavior and actions, the White Queen has experienced it countless times. If it were someone else, she would not hesitate to use her unskilled ability to slaughter the other party. But in front of Feng, she found that she couldn't afford that kind of thought. But the more domineering the person, the easier it is to be conquered by hegemony. What does the identity of the White Queen represent in the city of Mosa? Daughter of the richest man in Mosa, heir to the throne of the largest trading group in the United States. Because she was a mutant, the White Queen was abandoned by the elders of the family at a very young age, and even for a long time, she was locked up in a hospital room controlled by her adoptive mother. Her first mutant ability is telepathy, which gives her a lot of strange eyes. Until the day Feng crossed into this world, her diamond ability first awakened, so she escaped from that ward, but she was exhausted on the way to be hunted down, fainted in a small alley, and was saved by Feng. Since then, the cold character of the White Queen has gradually been changed by Feng's facelessness. Remembering Feng's rogue actions towards herself in the morning, the White Queen's heartbeat accelerated a little. Since she was born, she has never been teased like this. In the past, as long as other men looked at her more, they were either killed by the bodyguards sent by her father, or strangled by her telepathic mutant ability. As for Feng, this man, she had no choice. However, she did not resist in her heart, but under these days, she became more and more dependent on Feng. After waiting for his wife to leave, Feng also changed into a suit and drove a Maserati to the city center. As a second-rate director, Feng naturally cannot only make the movie Die Hard. Which of the movies in his previous life has he not seen? Men in Black 123, Mission Impossible 1 2 3 4 5 6, Fast and Furious, and so on and so forth, and so on. As long as he makes these movies one by one, not to mention a small richest man in Mosa. I am afraid that it is possible to become the richest man in the United States. Therefore, Li Feng's initial plan to come to this world is to become a director who is even better than old man Spielberg. At that time, worth trillions and ranking among the upper classes, which is not easy. Today, Li Feng is going to work with a film company to promote the trailer of Die Hard. This film, he expects to earn about 1 billion yuan. He intends to invest all of these billion in the White Queen's enterprise. It's not that the White Queen's family business lacks money, but because the moment Li Feng met the White Queen, the system suddenly woke up. As long as he makes a movie, the system rewards a large number of items from the movie. The pistol used by the protagonist of Die Hard, Keanu Reeves' dog, the glasses of Agent Bean, the exclusive car of Fast and Furious, the helicopter in which the protagonist of Hurricane Rescue rides. Episode 2. Of course, the system does not always give some useless rewards, and sometimes there will be something that makes Li Feng's eyes shine. For example, Agent Technology in Ace Agent. The assassination technique of this killer is not too cold. The memory mind of Sherlock. Eocalypse, military commander, Steppenwolf template. Especially the Steppenwolf template, this is where Li Feng dares not to be a bodyguard in the city of Mosa. Although he never used the Steppenwolf template after getting it, he who has seen DC movies is not worried about any big trouble. After all, at this point in time, mutants have not fully erupted, Magneto has not appeared, and even the earliest Hulk should still be in experiments. As for the Titan who claimed to kill half of the cosmic creatures, Li Feng didn't pay attention to it. He just wants to be a salted fish in peace, live happily with his wife Emma, make billions and tens of billions by making movies, and become a globally respected director. As for saving the world, becoming a superhero or something, how important is it to accompany your wife? Li Feng was not interested in these at all, and did not want to participate in various so-called power struggles. However, if that Titan comes to Earth to destroy his good life, he doesn't mind being the Lord again, summoning the Avengers, and solving him by the way. Man does not offend me, I do not offend. I don't cause trouble, but I'm not afraid of it. This was Li Feng's idea. Thinking of this, Li Feng glanced at the navigation and had already reached his destination. He parked his car in the studio's underground parking lot and headed to the top floor. For the director, the promotional film is a very important link, during which he also has to meet with several leading actors, which cannot be delayed. And yet, at this moment, dozens of black vans suddenly stopped outside the building, blocking the entire street entrance. In the van, there are strong men in black suits and masks. They all have Hydra tattoos on their necks, and their eyes are fierce. One of the leaders held a silenced submachine gun in his left hand and a photograph painted with an X in his right hand. The person in the photo is Li Feng. Recently, the night in Mosa has not been as quiet as usual. The more developed the city, the more hidden dangers hidden in the dark. Not long ago, the leader of the largest gangster force in Mosa City was assassinated by an unknown organization and replaced the leadership of the entire gang. Except for some big people living in the upper class who knew about it, few civilians noticed these changes, because their eyes are all focused on one person, Li Feng. With the continuous rise of this genius director, Mosa's entertainment industry is almost becoming more and more interested in this name. Among them is the new leader of the underground gang in Mosa City, who has stormed away. Soon, Li Feng took the elevator to the top floor of the building, the Radio building, the most recognizable building in the city of Mosa. Some celebrity drinking parties are often held here, which is a relatively prosperous place, so the investors of Die Hard directly wrapped this place in order to publicize it. At this point, the reporters and media have not yet arrived. Li Feng has enough time, he is not in a hurry, but slowly walked out of the elevator. But what made him feel incredible? On the floor in front of him, there were corpses lying down. They are full of bullet holes visible to the naked eye. In addition, the surface of the bodies of these corpses had a thick layer of ice, causing the entire room to be filled with an icy coldness. What happened? Li Feng frowned, and there was a smell of blood in the air that made him feel uncomfortable. Robbery? Or revenge? Li Feng was about to call the organizer to ask what was going on, when a sharp and piercing scream suddenly came from his ears. He frowned, his intuition telling him something wasn't quite right, but he couldn't say it. At this moment, there was a piercing scream in his ears again, faintly accompanied by some kind of suppressed gunshot. Li Feng narrowed his eyes, gave up the idea of calling the police, followed the source of the sound, walked to a conference room in the depths, and pushed the door and walked in. Click. When Li Feng entered, he found that the conference room was full of people. It's just that what shocked him was that these people had submachine guns full of murderous flavor hanging on their bodies. At the same time, in front of these guys, there were two corpses with familiar faces. Li Feng recognized at a glance that it was the two male protagonists in Die Hard hired by the director team. What the hell? Li Feng's face instantly turned cold. The protagonist of Lao Tzu's movie was slaughtered? What's the situation? He raised his head and stared head-on at these people sitting in the conference room, all tall and tall, with cold eyes, which filled the air with a strong sense of oppression. Is Li Feng the director of Die Hard? Suddenly, a strong bald man sitting at the top spoke indifferently towards Li Feng. He had a strong banded aura on his body, his eyes were extremely cold, and there was a looming cold aura on his body, which made the temperature around him drop a little. Li Feng didn't know the purpose of this group of guys, nodded with a cold face, and didn't speak. Our boss said that we want you to make movies for him for free for the rest of your life, otherwise, whoever dares to take your film, we will slaughter whom, you. Do you have any opinions? Hearing this, Li Feng finally realized. Isn't that what threatened? Still making movies for free for life? When Lao Tzu does good deeds? Li Feng's face directly darkened, his hands hugged his chest, and he sneered, you boss, what is it? What if, I don't? In the face of this large gang of fierce men, he did not have the slightest fear. The group of strong men with guns on their bodies were stunned for a moment, and then laughed wildly, and their eyes were full of ridicule and disdain when they looked at Li Feng. The bald man at the head slowly stood up, took out a cigar from his pocket, and took out a sharp blade, put it against Li Feng's neck, and sneered, it seems that you can't recognize the situation? I'll give you two options, either kneel down and agree to my request, or I'll pick off your tendons, and throw you into the river to feed the crocodiles. Or say, dash. He kicked the two corpses at his feet. Do you want to be killed by me like these two scraps? The threat of red fruit. If Li Feng was just an ordinary person, when he heard such words, he could only choose to obey. After all, there were nearly 24 submachine guns pointed at themselves, as well as corpses in one place. But now Li Feng was not flustered, but his eyes were even more gloomy. His keen gaze soon saw the tattoo on the bald man's neck. Is it the Hydra people? Episode 3. Li Feng did not have the slightest fear, stretched out his hand and pressed the bald man's shoulder. Originally, I was in a good mood today, but you killed the protagonist I invited and destroyed my propaganda meeting, so none of you want to leave today. Upon hearing this, these gangsters were stunned again. What's the thing? Did we hear it wrong, or did you say it wrong? In the face of so many muzzles, shouldn't you immediately kneel on the ground and cry for mercy? What is the situation? Are the directors who make movies so good now? Boy, don't give a face. The bald man laughed viciously, and everyone in the conference room stood up. But they didn't choose to shoot rudely, because their purpose here was to coerce Li Feng to help them make movies and become their money-making tools. Therefore, they did not intend to kill Li Feng. But if this guy is not sensible, they naturally have 10,000 ways to make him unable to survive and unable to seek death. It seems that you have given up the only chance to live. Li Feng's face gradually tightened, and murderous intent appeared in his eyes. It's time to try the power of the Steppenwolf template. And yet, just as he was about to try, the elevator was suddenly opened, and a figure wearing a straitjacket and carrying a shield rushed out. Captain America? When Li Feng saw this person's appearance, he was stunned. And when these strong men in front of them saw this figure, a flash of fear flashed on their faces, and the bald man did not hesitate to raise his gun and said, shoot, let me beat these two miscellaneous pieces together into a sieve. Obviously, this group of guys also did not expect Captain America to break in at this time. Captain America during this period should have just woken up and had not yet created the Avengers. As a S.H.I.E.L.D. person, Captain America is definitely a headache for some Hydra molecules. In the face of Li Feng, an unarmed second-rate director, the bald men have a way to torture. But in the face of Captain America, the frozen man, they must pick up their spirits. As for Li Feng, they didn't care at all. A second-rate director. Like this kind of goods, they can find a dozen a day. Compared to killing Captain America, what counts? But what they didn't expect was that Li Feng was the most threatening person in this office. He was already impatient. These guys with Hydra tattoos on their necks spoiled the good mood of his day. Not only slaughtered the protagonist he invited, but even planned to arrest him to make a free movie for a lifetime. Are you kidding? Stand back, leave it to me here. Captain America glanced at Li Feng and gave him a warning look. But Li Feng didn't pay attention to him at all. At the moment when the sub ejected the chamber, Li Feng and Captain America turned into a black shadow at the same time, and rushed to the sides, with tacit understanding. And yet, Li Feng's speed actually surpassed Captain America in an instant. Like a ghost, he crossed through the dense bullets, and in an instant he came to a strong man, and lightly threw a punch. Die. Click. The skull of this Hydra member was directly shattered. Shit. When the other Hydra members saw this scene, they directly cursed, and at the same time aimed their guns at Li Feng. They realized that this guy was the biggest problem. But, too late. What Li Feng had was a Steppenwolf template, and although he had never used it, he usually had a feeling of endless energy when he was doing certain things. In other words, all the attributes of the Steppenwolf's body, Li Feng possessed them all. Even if he encounters the Hulk in his heyday, Li Feng can easily deal with it. What are these ordinary people with guns? At such a close distance, just relying on these bullets with kinetic energy to want to hurt Li Feng was simply a fool's dream. Bang, bang, bang. After several piercing sounds, the conference room was covered with blood and corpses. Except for the bald man who was bubbling with cold air all over his body, no one survived. Li Feng stood on the table, wiped his fists, and looked at the bald man with an indifferent gaze. The next second, the bald man covered his body with a layer of ice picks, causing the temperature of the entire conference room to drop. This is Mutants? Captain America exclaimed. Unfortunately, you all have to die here. The bald man sneered, and the manipulator's icy cold aura rushed towards Li Feng. I can't imagine that you can meet mutants here. Li Feng muttered in his heart, not panicking, just lightly raised 5 fingers, and shook them sharply into the air. Moment. A dark purple electric light flashed out, turning into a huge giant axe, and abruptly split the bald man, who turned into an ice pick, in half. After the blood flashed, everything calmed down. The bald man's dead eyes had a strong fear in them, as if he had seen a demon. Is this the power of the Wasteland axe? Li Feng secretly curled the corners of his mouth, and his fingers contracted slightly. The experience of the Steppenwolf template is not bad. You, don't move. Hearing this voice, Li Feng slowly turned around. The Captain America, who had arrived temporarily from S.H.I.E.L.D, didn't know when he picked up the gun on the ground and pointed it at him. You're going to do it to me? Chris, you know me? Captain America's pupils shrank and he paused suddenly. I don't want to get into trouble or find enemies for myself. If you know each other, use the name of S.H.I.E.L.D and clean up this place. I know these guys are Hydra people, you take the credit, don't say my name, don't investigate me, otherwise I will find you, and punch your head. After dropping these words, Li Feng turned into a black shadow, flashed past Captain America, and disappeared directly. He didn't want to reveal his identity, because it would definitely attract the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D. But this does not mean that if trouble comes to the door, he will stand by and succumb to obedience. If some tired and crooked people want to come to him, he will definitely not keep his hand, let alone have the slightest mercy. Following Li Feng's disappearance, Captain America found that his back had already been soaked in cold sweat. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but couldn't say anything. This guy, how exactly did you solve these gangsters? Why do I know my true identity? Looking at the gangsters lying around with shattered skulls, Captain America sighed. Li Feng's perversion actually made him feel instinctively fearful. This should not be present with one agent. Unexpectedly, this second-rate director actually has a detached side, Captain America murmured. Before coming to this building, he received news from S.H.I.E.L.D. Originally, he was here to protect Li Feng, but unexpectedly, Li Feng protected him. Episode 4. Half a day later, Captain America took out his mobile phone, dialed 1, and said softly, Chief, I'm in some trouble here, and something you're interested in. Meanwhile, after Li Feng quietly solved the trouble in the mansion, a black van stopped at the door of the villa where he lived. In the van sat a neon man, wearing a silver katana, and there was a faint silver color flowing in the meridians of his arms. Silver Samurai, one of the mutants. In fact, the bald mutant who attacked Li Feng earlier, including the mutant who squatted outside the villa in advance, was all the newly promoted underground leader of Mosa City, sent by the riot away. Their real purpose was not to coerce Li Feng into becoming their free labor, but for kidnapping the daughter of Mosa's richest man. To this end, the Rampage made a very thorough plan. First of all, he planned to use the capture of Li Feng as a way to coerce the White Queen. Second, he will use the White Queen's life to force the richest man in Mosa to cede all the entertainment industry in order to expand his territory. Violent Walk believes that as long as he catches Li Feng, he is not afraid that the White Queen will not comply, because as far as his investigation was concerned, the only person close to the White Queen was Li Feng. Truly, there is nothing wrong with the idea of running away, but he did not expect another identity of the White Queen at all. When the Silver Warrior saw the plump woman enter the villa, a strong desire flashed in his eyes, raised his hand, ordered all the killers in the car, quietly touched the perimeter of the villa, and killed the bodyguards stationed outside the villa flower bed. These bodyguards were all arranged by the White Queen's father, and although they were not the top in the country, each of them was a mercenary. It's just that these bodyguards are still too immature compared to the mutant Silver Warrior. After easily solving the battle, the Silver Warrior broke into the living room with 5 killers with cold eyes. And yet, as if expected, the White Queen changed into a compact pajamas, sat on the sofa, and looked at these cold-blooded guys faintly. Hello, Emma. The leading silver katana put away his katana and smiled at the White Queen. Welcome, my friends, would you like a drink? The White Queen smiled charmingly and said hello to these killers. She had already discovered the existence of these people through telepathy and learned that Li Feng was in trouble. But she wasn't worried. This is the city of Mosa, her father's territory. If something happened to Li Feng, she would definitely find everyone and slaughter them. If you're willing to take off your top, I'd love to accompany you for a drink. The Silver Samurai laughed viciously and directly drew the katana in his hand. He doesn't intend to talk more than nonsense. The Rampage gave him only 2 hours. If the time has not come to catch the White Queen, but let the richest man in Mosa City send someone to support, then this operation can be regarded as a failure. What are the consequences of failure? Everyone, die. He did not want to die. Take away. The Silver Warrior raised his hand and waved, and the 2 killers walked directly towards the White Queen, while taking out the silver handcuffs from their bodies. If you can catch the White Queen personally, it will definitely be a great achievement. When the time comes, let the boss of the Rampage satisfied, and they will all be rewarded. Seeing that these killers were about to touch her, the White Queen's eyes were full of indifference. She gently raised her tender white hand and suddenly squeezed it in front of her. So, I saw that in the palm of his hand, a diamond arrow exploded, instantly penetrating the heads of the two killers. The two killers were still immersed in the reward after the mission was completed, and they had been instantly killed by the sharp arrow formed by this diamond. The sudden change made the remaining killers dumbfounded. The White Queen hugged her hands to her chest, slowly got up under the dull gaze of the killers, and said dignifiedly, I haven't used this ability to kill for a long time, you should feel honored. After speaking, her body turned into a crystal-clear diamond body, which looked particularly beautiful and dazzling under the bright sun. Even if these killers were stupid, they reacted with them, and fear burst out of their eyes. Are you a mutant? Telepathy, diamond form. Yes, this is the White Queen. After remembering the strength of the mutants, several killers panicked. The next second, they directly raised the assault rifles on their bodies, and no longer cared about the order to capture the White Queen alive, and directly pulled the trigger. If they don't, they're dead. No one spares their lives. And what about mutants? Under a 5.56 caliber bullet, even the most powerful mutants will be beaten into a sieve, right? However, what they did not expect was that the White Queen did not give any attention to these almost toy-like firearms. The bullets that kept breaking the air hit her, but they all turned into powder. How powerful is the diamond form White Queen? Her body is not only equivalent to invulnerable, but also able to withstand the blows of great power, without even feeling fatigue, without water and food supplementation, and even the most powerful telepathic of the mutants is immune to mental attacks. 2 seconds later, countless densely packed sharp drill blades floated out of thin air beside the Confession Queen. Killing intent broke out. This group of killers, unable to control their inner fears, screamed and pulled the trigger. However, nothing works. Die. The White Queen waved her hand gently. The drill blade burst out, like the scythe of death, and pierced the heads of several killers without stopping. Only the Silver Samurai remained. You're a mutant too, aren't you? The White Queen gracefully propped her chin and said coldly, I feel it. You guessed it. The Silver Samurai laughed viciously, his arms instantly turned into silver metal, and the katana in his hand merged with his 5 fingers. He made the usual movements of samurai and said, Pray, stinky bitch, I swear it will make you cool next. As soon as the words fell, the Silver Samurai shot up and slaughtered towards the White Queen. However, the moment he approached the White Queen, her diamond form slowly disappeared, and she just stretched out a finger and pressed the Silver Warrior's forehead. The next second, the Silver Warrior was stunned suddenly, his face became extremely dull, and he instantly lost his combat effectiveness. What I ask you, what do you answer? The White Queen said coldly, Who sent you? The Silver Warrior replied expressionlessly, Storm, the underground emperor of the Mosa city gangster. The White Queen asked again, How is my husband Feng now? The Silver Warrior replied, I don't know, we act in 2 groups. The White Queen nodded lightly, and her slender fingers flicked again. The Silver Samurai fell to the ground and his brain died. Episode 5. The White Queen's telepathy is just as powerful as the diamond form. She can not only use this ability to read the thoughts and memories of others, but also forcibly modify the memories of the other party, control their thinking, carry out mental shielding, and even connect the thinking of multiple people, using telepathy to put the victim in an unconscious state of sleep. In general, among all the mutants, the White Queen is second only to Professor X's telepathic abilities. In the end, all the killers who broke into the villa died at the hands of the White Queen. She stretched, and then used her diamond ability to clean up the bodies. For the time being, she didn't want Feng to contact the fact that she was a mutant so early. After all, in her eyes, Feng is still just an ordinary person. Of course, Feng did not know that his wife had been attacked by another group of killers. At this time, he had just walked out of a high-end clothing store on the street, carrying brand new clothes that he had spent hundreds of thousands of yuan on. This was Feng's habit, and every time he went out and went home, he would bring gifts to the White Queen. In his eyes, this is called freshness. Although with the family background of the White Queen, what clothes she wants, a word can make a well-known tailor. But every time Feng buys clothes, she will take them seriously and wear them out. The new European dress on the shelves this time looks pretty good, and my wife will be very happy to receive it. Feng hummed a song while tucking his clothes into the back seat of his Maserati. In his eyes, the White Queen tends to be perfect in both facial features and figure, belonging to the absolute slightly fat and plump type, and she has a rare fox charm between her moves. Therefore, the more clothes that highlight the figure, the more suitable it is for her. Before Feng chose clothes for her, she basically wore some simple civilian clothes, completely covering up her figure. Feng, who was about to drive home, did not know that he had now attracted the attention of countless people. In response to Feng's arrogant behavior in the building, the big screen located at the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. in New York City has displayed all of Feng's private information. And in front of the big screen, director Nick Fury, Agent Coulson, the newly returned American team, was contemplative. It seems that there is nothing special, a second-rate director who makes movies? Is it really that fierce? Team America answered, When I first met him, I thought the same, but after he killed the group of Hydra elements in the conference room, I was completely dumbfounded. Nick Fury nodded and asked, Have any of you actually met this person? Agent Coulson hesitated and said, I've seen it. I went to the scene last time he filmed The Expendables 3. The Expendables 3 was also filmed by him? Nick Fury was stunned for a moment. As agents, they are particularly sensitive to this kind of theme. After all, who doesn't want their profession to be made into a movie? Almost every scene in The Expendables 3 fits the scene when they are on a mission. It's just that what Nick Fury doesn't understand is why Li Feng, an ordinary guy, would take the boat of the richest daughter of Mosa. Don't look at the current Li Feng is known as the action movie director of the new century, but in the eyes of the richest man in Mosa, he is still no different from an ordinary person, right? I've seen the richest man in Mosa, a proud and arrogant man. Nick Fury flicked the cigarette ash in his hand and said in a deep voice, in terms of appearance alone, there is nothing surprising about this guy Li Feng. How can he be fancy to Emma, the daughter of the richest man in Marsa? Chief, Agent Coulson, as if remembering something, slid his palm against the large screen, and several pictures of hospital wards appeared. I have investigated that the daughter of the richest man in Mosa was once locked up in a hospital room, and according to the grapevine, she may be one of the mutants. Mutants? Nick Fury's brows furrowed. Could it be that Li Feng is also a mutant, so they will come together? I don't know. Coulson replied. You go and reach out to both of them, and if you can, gain their trust and bring them in. Yes. Coulson was stunned for a moment and didn't ask why. Usually in the event of this kind of incident, S.H.I.E.L.D. will investigate for a period of time before making a decision to solicit or erase it. But this time, Director Nick did not do so. This is clearly different from usual, but Coulson doesn't make his own decisions, and he knows exactly where he stands. A small agent, not yet qualified to inquire about the director's decision. By the way, Coulson-Nick Fury suddenly stopped him and said, this guy named Li Feng, if you can't recruit him in, don't worry. I always feel that he is more mysterious than we thought. Yes. Coulson nodded and left. Meanwhile, KFC City, United States. A newly established mutant school, the Brainwave Amplification Lab. Professor X took off his brainwave amplification helmet and whispered to the X-Men member Beast behind him. Found it, in Mosa City. Did she use her abilities again? The Beast took a deep breath and said, are we going to stop it? Professor? No, the time has not yet come. Professor X shook his head slightly and said, there are many mutants hidden in Mosa City. Just now, I saw 2 new mutants, but they both died 10 minutes later. The brainwave signal disappeared, and I couldn't see anything. Someone is slaughtering mutants? The Beast tensed up and said, is it that Magneto guy? No, not him. Professor X still shook his head and said, Hancock, I suspect that a new mutant has emerged, but my brainwaves can't detect his presence. What? The Beast's face was full of shock, and he said, unexpectedly. And the presence that you cannot perceive? That man, very powerful. Professor X's face was serious, and he muttered, I am afraid that he will become an uncontrollable existence like Magneto, and then mutants will be dangerous. Maybe we can try to contact him. The Beast stroked his chin and said, let Wolverine pass? Don't worry, I'll try to monitor his brain waves, and if he's a mutant, maybe I can talk to him directly. Professor X took a deep breath and put on the brainwave amplifier again. The light in the entire laboratory dimmed down. One by one, the light like stars flickered, and countless pictures flashed in Professor X's mind. City of Mosa. As soon as he parked the Maserati, Li Feng felt a flashing tingling pain in his head. His brows furrowed slightly, but soon he saw the beautiful figure of the White Queen not far away, so he didn't care, and trotted towards her. Wife, I'm back. Episode 6. City of Mosa, Private Villa. Li Feng hugged the White Queen's face and kissed her as usual, then handed her the clothes he bought, and said with a smile, Lord wife, I promise that you will like the clothes you bought this time. Open them quickly. What time did I not like the clothes you bought? The White Queen glanced at him, but when she took out a few clothes and saw a few low-cut outfits, she couldn't help but be ashamed and indignant. You. It's also too revealing. Put it on and see. Li Feng smiled and urged. The White Queen glared at him, but did not refuse, took off her pajamas in front of Li Feng, and changed into a new dress. Her charming temperament was even more charming. Look, perfect proportions. Li Feng looked up and down and scrupulously hugged the White Queen's waist into his arms, and gently stroked the slender soft waist with his fingers. My husband picked it well, right? The White Queen snorted softly, her legs faintly soft, but she didn't break free. For some reason, she always felt that she was very conservative in front of Li Feng. By the way, the announcement of Die Hard will be a little troublesome. I have to tell the investor that 2 protagonists have been murdered. Li Feng suddenly remembered something and said. He wasn't going to tell the White Queen what had just happened, and it would be difficult to do if she knew that she had the ability to take over a dozen Hydra members alone. Didn't you promise me to accompany me shopping? The White Queen broke free of his arm and snorted coldly. Li Feng hesitated, looked around the villa, and said, then I'll let the bodyguards outside come over and inform. Wait. The White Queen shook her head and said, I don't want to go shopping again. You better call first. The bodyguards in the villa were all destroyed by the killers brought by the Silver Warrior, and she didn't want Li Feng to be suspicious for no reason. Good. Li Feng nodded, took out his mobile phone, and called the investor. Soon, the other party gave a response, claiming that S.H.I.E.L.D. would be solely responsible for the matter, and the announcement of Die Hard was changed to 2 days later. Li Feng did not have any objections to this. Presumably the US team came forward to solve this trouble, so he didn't need to worry more. After hanging up the phone, Li Feng turned around and glanced at the White Queen in the living room, the fair and tender skin that flashed through the gap in the collar, and the 2 straight long legs, combined with the clothes he picked with his own hands, suddenly felt that his snort was hot. "Why are you staring at me like that?" The White Queen glanced at Li Feng with those glasses with tear moles, but did not dodge, but put her straight legs on the table and had an unobstructed view. Li Feng smiled, threw himself towards the White Queen, and said with a smile, "Wife, since you don't want to go shopping, then let's find something else to do, right?" "What? Affair?" The White Queen's face turned crimson, she glared at him, and tried to push away, but she was weak. Hey. When the words fell, Li Feng picked up the White Queen and rushed into the bedroom with both feet. 2 days later, early in the morning, Li Feng ate the breakfast made by the White Queen herself while admiring her flushed cheeks. In the past 2 days, the two can be said to have not even taken a step out of the door, so they stayed in the bedroom for 2 whole days. As for what was done, everyone who understands it. Li Feng showed a gentle smile on his face and rubbed the White Queen's unconsciously soft legs, causing the latter to stare at him with disgust. Although this knife-mouthed tofu-hearted wife said no, her body was honestly terrible. After tossing for 2 days, he actually had the energy to make breakfast for himself. If it weren't for the system that made Li Feng's body much stronger, I'm afraid he wouldn't even have the strength to walk. After eating breakfast, the White Queen stood up, straightened Li Feng's collar, and gently instructed, "Come back early tonight, I have recently learned some pretty good dishes. If you come back late, you won't be able to eat." "Don't worry, my wife." Li Feng kissed her forehead and said with a grin, "Tonight. Guaranteed to keep you out of bed. You said the same last time." The White Queen held her hands to her chest, the corners of her mouth turned up, with a faint mockery, stretched out her fingers and scratched Li Feng's face. "See you in the evening. If you have any trouble, you can call me. I will let my father send someone to solve it." "Good." Li Feng smiled slightly and turned to leave. In order to better enhance the publicity of Die Hard, the investor decided to hold the premiere directly today, and Li Feng, as the director, must attend a singing party on the spot. In this cocktail party, not only the more famous directors in the industry were invited, but also many celebrities from the upper class came to the scene. Although all this is due to the arrogance of the investor, it is not excluded that Li Feng will have a social impact when filming The Expendables 123. Soon, Li Feng came to the top floor of the building as usual. Unlike last time, many people had already gathered in the hall at this time. Li Feng, as the director of the film, was invited by the organizers to the stage and said a few words, and was surrounded by the media. "Director Li Feng, I heard that you plan to make some similar spy films next. Can you tell us about the specific plot?" "Mr. Li Feng, what do you think as a director about the murder of the starring actor? Is it related to your personal grudge?" "Mr. Li Feng, as a new generation of action film directors, I heard that you have merged the 2 positions of director and screenwriter. How do you maintain a balance between the 2? Countless questions came overwhelmed, and Li Feng was not panicked. He had been prepared before coming, so his answers were all correct. After the interview, most of the guests went to watch the premiere, while Li Feng came backstage alone, intending to eat a delicious buffet. But at this moment, his gaze suddenly saw a familiar face. Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D? How did this guy come to his own press conference? Could it be? Li Feng hurriedly turned his back to avoid letting him find out. As a veteran worker in the Marvel world, Coulson's popularity in Li Feng's heart is too great. If this guy appears in any scene, nothing good will happen in that scene. It is not difficult to guess that Coulson appeared here, probably because of the aftermath of the US team's return to S.H.I.E.L.D. Just as Li Feng was hesitating about how to leave early, Coulson suddenly walked towards him with a glass of wine. Mr. Li Feng, a genius director in the 21st century, has been famous for a long time. Coulson stretched out his wine glass, smiled at Li Feng and nodded, and showed his credentials. "My name is Coulson, and I am from the National Security Investigation Agency." Faced with this familiar way of greeting, Li Feng's face was expressionless, but there was a faint killing intent in his heart, which made the temperature around him seem to have dropped a lot. Episode 7. If he let S.H.I.E.L.D. intervene in his life at this time, he would be very angry. But if you pretend not to know anything, I am afraid it will cause more trouble. After thinking for a few seconds, Li Feng decided to improvise on the spot. "Oh, what's going on?" Li Feng nodded lightly, and did not mean to toast in return. Coulson withdrew his hand rather embarrassed. No matter how stupid he was, he could see that Li Feng didn't seem to welcome him, but he didn't care too much. Doing this line often encountered such a famous person, and it was normal to be looked down upon. He whispered, "You should still have an impression of what happened here 2 days ago, right? We have received reports that the largest gangster group in Mosa City has targeted you, so can you please provide some information on this? The National Security Investigation Agency may guarantee your safety." Hearing this, Li Feng knew that it was difficult to get out today. He took a deep breath and tried his best to calm down. "I have warned the US team, but he still didn't listen to me." Coulson's body immediately froze and tentatively asked, "Chris told me, you seem to know him? Does it matter if you recognize him or not?" Li Feng sneered and said, Coulson, as a little agent of S.H.I.E.L.D, you should be a smart person. I don't like to talk nonsense with smart people. If there is anything, you can just say it. Coulson was suddenly speechless. He didn't expect that Li Feng actually knew that he was a person from S.H.I.E.L.D. It seems that this guy in front of him is definitely not an ordinary person. He thought for a few seconds before he said seriously, Mr. Li Feng, as you think, I am indeed from S.H.I.E.L.D. And the purpose of my coming here is to find out why you have some powers that normal people cannot control. Of course, maybe you'll be offended by my rude questioning, but that's okay. Because in the entire United States, S.H.I.E.L.D. has absolute control, and we are independent of other governments, even the White House. We are committed to finding and protecting every strong person who distinguishes us from ordinary people, and you are one of them. If you are willing to cooperate with me, we better find a quiet place to talk. Maybe you will be interested in joining S.H.I.E.L.D. After speaking, Coulson habitually shook his shoulders and waited for Li Feng's response. Oh, I'm not interested. Li Feng hardly thought about it, so he directly refused. Are you kidding? Lao Tzu now lives a happy life, his wife is caring, and he does not worry about eating and drinking. In a few years, he will become a top director, full of fame and worth trillions. Why join S.H.I.E.L.D.? Idle and panicked? Mr. Li Feng, you'd better think about it before giving me an answer. The smile on Coulson's face gradually faded and said, as you can see, S.H.I.E.L.D. has strongholds around the world, people like you are more or less rebellious, and we have many ways to solve such troubles. After all, no civilian in any country wants to be threatened by some uncontrollable factor, you say? What do you mean? Li Fengdong's face cooled, and killing intent emerged. You are threatening me. No, I'm just stating some facts. Coulson shook his head slightly and said, I just want to tell you that there are actually not many people like you. Saying that, Coulson took out a mobile phone, pulled out a video, photos, placed it in front of Li Feng, and said, look, this is a physicist in the state next door to the city of Mosa, who mutated into a green monster after being exposed to gamma rays for a while. And this, the guy in the red tights with a spider tattooed on his chest, gliding through the buildings of Nuko, is amazing, right? And this, the guy who can even summon thunder and lightning with a hammer in his hand. I almost peed my pants when I first saw the video. There's even this. The guy with steel all over his body, their kind called him Steel Lux, and no projectile thermal weapon could damage him, not a grenade. This, the guy who can stretch out a few iron claws on his hand. Did you find that he looks a lot like a wolf? That longing look in the eyes, very charming. Look, Coulson smiled, put away his phone, and said, Mr. Li Feng, as I said just now, there are actually not many people like you, and if one day, you can work with them, this is a good temptation, right? Li Feng's eyes were indifferent, and he still didn't mean to speak, but he knew that from the moment Coulson took out these photos and videos, it meant that the Marvel Universe was officially on track. If he were to change to someone else who crossed over, he might immediately join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then pretend to fight the Avengers. But at this time, he just wanted to make movies and then become a big director who attracted worldwide attention. There is no risk and no need to pay for life. Seeing that Li Feng did not answer himself, Coulson took out a business card from his pocket and handed it over, saying, Mr. Li Feng, this is my phone number. If you think about it clearly, you can call me. No need. Li Feng put his hands in his pockets, turned around lightly, and dropped a few words. Coulson, I don't want to get into trouble, and I don't want to have anything to do with S.H.I.E.L.D. The thing that saves the world, the thing that saves humanity, is not for me. I just want to be a big director, and if these people in the video want to be the main character of my movie, they can contact me. I promise the salary will satisfy them, but if you and S.H.I.E.L.D. behind you are delusional about taking control of me, or ruining my life, I promise, you will regret it. The threat in the tone is incomparably strong. Looking at Li Feng's fading figure, Coulson took a deep breath, pressed the communicator behind his ear, and said in a low voice, Director, you heard everything he said just now, right? After a long time, the headset came back to Nick Fury's thick voice. Well, I hear you, this is a strong guy. Coulson sighed and said helplessly, it's not easy to do things. I have to say that in Coulson's impression, Li Feng is definitely a person who is extremely difficult. In fact, in the conversation just now, he has already gone through both soft and hard, whether it is a request or a threat. But Li Feng, that is, oil and salt, do not enter. Make it clear that you don't want to be a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. So there are only two ways to do it next. Or, erase this uncontrollable factor. Or, think of another way to force Li Feng to join. Episode 8. Coulson suddenly muttered, Chief. We investigated that Li Feng's wife's father, the richest man in Mosa City, has been very restless in recent years. Maybe we can start with him. You mean, knock on the richest man in Mosa City and make Li Feng obey? Nick Fury squinted his eyes and said in a deep voice, I hope it works. This matter will be like this for the time being. You arrange for people to keep an eye on Li Feng. Don't let him make any trouble, and leave the rest to me. Yes. Coulson hung up. S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. Fury stared at Li Feng's photo with that eagle-like gaze, while his finger scratched a surveillance video. In the video, the corners of Li Feng's mouth turned up, turned into a black shadow, and instantly came to a gangster, hammering his skull with his bare hands. At the same time, the picture is frozen in the scene where Li Feng raises one hand and uses air to chop to death the mutant covered in ice. This level of lethality is comparable to the American team. Fury took a deep breath, a look of shock in his eyes. For Li Feng's indifferent personality, he actually didn't care. What he cares more about is the ability of this person. The abilities it shows in all aspects are incomparably similar to the American team when they woke up in the early days. If he can't be drawn to S.H.I.E.L.D, I'm afraid there will be more uncontrollable factors in the future. Thinking of this, Nick Fury did not hesitate anymore, and said to the assistant next to him, "Call up the personal information and phone number of the richest man in Mosa City. Let me talk to him, and the call process should be kept confidential." Yes, the assistant nodded slightly. 10 seconds later, the call connects. Soon, the phone was connected, and a calm voice came from the other side of the phone. "Hey, this is my personal number. Who are you?" "My name is Nick Fury. I am the director of the National Security Investigation Agency. Your son-in-law Li Feng has been targeted by us, and you must listen to every word I say next." Nick Fury didn't have any nonsense, and said in a quick tone, "We know that you have bribed officials 36 times in Mosa City, 25 times in the commercial framing of stolen goods and blame, 65 times in unfair market behavior, and your company still has a business unit engaged in money laundering so far. I know everything about you, even how many boyfriends your mistress has had and how many rich people she has slept with." The other end of the phone was silent for a long time before a dry word came back. "You, what do you want me to do?" "It's simple." Nick Fury curled the corners of his mouth and said, "I want you to make something that makes your son-in-law feel troublesome, such as a bad box office of the movie, or hitting a wall during filming, etc., as long as it makes him want to continue making movies." The other end of the phone seemed to be a little incredulous. "It's that simple?" "Of course, more complicated." Nick Fury sneered and said, "Let your daughter leave Li Feng." "This? I couldn't make decisions, and my daughter never liked to listen to me." "Then do as I say." After speaking, Nick Fury directly hung up the phone. The situation is much simpler than expected, and the richest man in Mosa shows no signs of uncooperation. This is not surprising. After all, S.H.I.E.L.D is a special department at the highest level in this part of the United States, and even the president's personal safety needs their jurisdiction. What is the richest man in a small Mosa city? Although the White Queen's father is the richest man in Mosa City, he is also a half-influential politician, and he can almost break through the existence of a hole in Mosa City with a word. But before the Aegis situation, he was still nothing. That's why Nick Fury dares to threaten so directly and boldly. The person on the other end of the phone obviously knew this fact, so after the silence, he relented. Meanwhile, Li Feng sat in the seat of the premier, sipping wine lightly, recalling the previous conversation with Coulson. A large part of the reason why his attitude is so decisive is because he does not want S.H.I.E.L.D to ruin his good life. If someone from S.H.I.E.L.D wants to force their way in, then he doesn't mind solving all problems. With the ability of the Steppenwolf template, wanting to deal with S.H.I.E.L.D, which has not yet formed the Avengers, is simply like eating and drinking. However, it is worth mentioning the videos that Coulson showed himself just now. The recovery of the Marvel Universe heralds a catastrophe for the entire planet. There is a saying that troubled times make heroes. This is also Li Feng's idea, but this hero is not the hero who saved the world. Rather, Li Feng curled the corners of his mouth. If in the next time, he will reproduce most of the important events that happened in the Marvel Universe through filming, then his worth will soar wildly in a short period of time. How far is it enough to soar? The whole country, and indeed the world, will be proud to have seen his films. At that time, the profits he will obtain will not only be tens of billions, trillions, so simple. Even, he can set up another Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Marvel world. As long as he succeeds, he can make money lying down, and he can live a life without shame with his wife. Thinking of this, Li Feng took out his mobile phone from his pocket and called Feynman, the economic person of the director team. While filming The Expendables 123, he formed a studio team, and Feynman was the first agent he recruited, and his ability was very good. "Hey old man, I have one thing to trouble you. Is it convenient?" "Just say, boss. I'm going to build a new film company, and it's called Marvel Studios Limited." "Marvel? What a unique name. How much do you need to invest?" "Put all the funds in your account, and when the release of Die Hard is over, all the people from the studio will be merged into the company." "All funds?" "Boss, what do you want to do?" "Later, you'll understand." Li Feng hung up the phone and immersed himself in his grand deeds. The city of Mosa, an underground boxing ring, is holding a fiery match with odds of 1:5. But at the scene, only one person sat in the largest position in the audience. He was thin, with blonde hair, a black bodysuit with a faint cigar scent, and his eyes were greedily gazing at the two fighters in the ring. He called Rampage. The new underground emperor of the city of Mosa is also the organizer of this black boxing stadium. Before he officially ascended the throne, the old underground emperor of the city of Mosa had been in control of the city for decades. But with the advent of the riot, the city of Mosa changed completely. Episode 9. At this moment, Storm suddenly stood up, walked to the center of the boxing ring, waved his hand impatiently, let the two boxers roll aside, and then said indifferently, "Bring it." A minute later, two gangsters, carrying a blonde man covered in blood, walked up and threw him on the ground. "I've not done anything to my men for a long time, dash." Stormy smiled viciously and pressed the blonde man's head with 5 fingers. "You know, I'm afraid of trouble and don't like dealing with people from the government. But I like money, I like a lot of money, so I took your advice. But the consequence of this is that I just arrived in Mosa City, and I was targeted by people from S.H.I.E.L.D. Do you know how much trouble this will cause me?" The voice fell. Click. The blonde man's arm was pinched off with one hand by the violent walk, and he let out a terrifying cry, trembling his body, and kept begging for mercy. "Boss. No, I was wrong, I shouldn't have given you this bad idea." "No, you're right, it's me who is wrong, I stupidly listened to you," Stormy said in an indifferent tone, and anyone could hear what kind of anger was contained under his tone. As for this poor guy kneeling on the ground, he proposed to kidnap Feng and the mastermind who later threatened the richest man in Mosa City. Originally, this plan was foolproof, and even in order to achieve the goal, Storm sent 2 of his own capable generals, the Iceman and the Silver Samurai. But no one could have imagined that Feng and the White Queen would directly kill them in seconds. That's not what makes Riot so angry. The deaths of the 2 mutants were nothing to him. The real trouble is that S.H.I.E.L.D. took over the rest of the business. This means that the Riot can no longer continue to do what he wants. No gangster wants to be targeted by S.H.I.E.L.D., and neither are mutants. Right at this moment, at the door of the underground black boxing stadium, 2 figures suddenly appeared. One of them, with a wolf-beard face, sharp eyes, and a strong figure. The other one, sitting in a wheelchair, his face was calm, like a pool of stagnant water. When he saw these 2 faces, his eyes shrank sharply, his body tightened, and he squinted. "X-Men? What are you doing here? A warning to you." Professor X took out a photo of Feng and the White Queen from his pocket and threw it in front of the Storm. "From now on, don't trouble these 2 people, otherwise the X-Men will treat you as enemies and tear you to pieces." Wolverine took over the right to speak, and his tone was indifferent. "What if I say no?" Violent cheeks twitched, and Sunran responded. This wasn't the first time he had dealt with the X-Men. As a mutant, he certainly knows what the presence of the X-Men represents. "You have no choice," Professor X said lightly. "It seems that you must think that I am easy to mess with." The Rampage laughed viciously and snapped his fingers. Around the black boxing arena, nearly 30 or 40 strong men with half-naked upper bodies slowly walked out, full of oppressive anger. "So," Uncle Wolf raised his hand sharply, and 6 claws cut through the space, letting out a wail. Just as he was about to rush forward, Professor X reached out to stop him, looked up and said calmly, "Storm, you mean, you want to fight the X-Men? No boss likes to be threatened." Storm said viciously, "Especially, in your own field." "Threat?" Professor X curled the corners of his mouth in a rare manner, and said sharply, No, we are not a threat, but warn." The voice fell. He suddenly raised 5 fingers and squeezed them out of thin air. Buzz buzz. Suddenly, everyone in the entire black boxing stadium screamed in pain while holding their heads. A terrifying psychic sensation spreads in these people's brains, tearing at their brain cells. But this scream, which only lasted for more than 10 seconds, stopped. Professor X and Wolverine did not pause and turned away. Fu asterisk K. Fu asterisk K. Fu asterisk K. Storming with a miserable white and angry face, he cursed a few times at the surroundings, but did not send anyone to catch up. This is the city of Mosa. If he wanted to, he could immediately call hundreds of brothers with submachine guns and beat these 2 guys into a sieve. But the Storm did not. He chose to swallow this breath. Because he doesn't want to have a vendetta with S.H.I.E.L.D. and the X-Men at the same time. But that doesn't mean he won't be angry. Storm turned around, looked at the shivering body, stretched out 5 dry fingers, and directly crushed his neck. Throw his body into a cesspool. Garbage is only worthy to stay with garbage. Yes. The body of the blonde man was carried down. With a gloomy face, he took out a handkerchief, wiped the blood from his fingers, took out his mobile phone again, made a call, and ordered, "Let me investigate. What is the origin of that guy named Feng? Why are so many people to protect him? And also, don't do those businesses recently. I don't want to cause trouble with S.H.I.E.L.D. The Silver Samurai and the Iceman have been killed. Let the Griffins and Angels come to me. And when things settle down, I will do a big deal." On the other end of the phone, without saying anything, he hung up. Storm took a deep breath, and the anger in his eyes gradually disappeared and gradually calmed down. The White Queen was one of the mutants, and he had heard something about it, but he had never been convinced. Now it seems that even the X-Men have come forward, and this matter is inseparable. But what is the origin of that guy named Feng? After the premiere of Die Hard, Feng drove back to the villa. It was already 8 o'clock at night, the lights in the living room were still on, and meals had been prepared on the table. The White Queen, wearing a sheen dress, is sitting on the sofa, leaning on her white and tender legs, like a pure relief, watching TV with relish, which is pleasing to the eye. "Honey, how did you know I was coming back and had specially prepared a meal?" Feng stepped forward directly and took him rudely into his arms. "Don't underestimate my connections." The White Queen glanced at him and said, 30 minutes later than I expected. "It's not a bit of trouble." Feng's fingers restlessly placed on the tender body, and said with a smile, "Go, eat together." He wasn't going to tell the White Queen that S.H.I.E.L.D had come to trouble her, which would make her suspicious. However, I have to say that the White Queen's cooking skills are simply excellent. Not only prepared a lot of precious ingredients, but even made a large bowl of caviar, paired with the crab paste of God King crab, which is simply fragrant. Before meeting Feng, the White Queen was a kitchen novice who knew nothing, and couldn't even wash the dishes. But after living with Feng, she was able to come up with some new tricks almost every day. This is also one of the reasons why Feng loves his wife so much. That's right. During the meal, the White Queen suddenly raised her beautiful eyes and said, "Father just called me and asked you not to continue making movies in the past 2 years. What?" Feng was stunned for a moment, thinking that he had misheard. "He bought us an island in Maldives. Shall we go on our honeymoon?" The White Queen tilted her head, her eyes narrowed into a crescent. Feng couldn't help but hesitate. 2 years? In 2 years, I'm afraid even the Battle of New York has passed, right? At that time, it was too late to make a movie, maybe even the fame would be much less. But his father-in-law's kindness, he was not easy to refuse. What can be done about this? The White Queen could see Feng's hesitation almost at a glance. She put down her chopsticks and asked seriously, "Husband, have you been worried a lot lately?" Episode 10. Hearing this, Feng was not nervous, and while enjoying the steak, he responded with a light smile, "It is indeed a bit troublesome." The slender hand of the White Queen holding the knife and fork paused slightly, with an imperceptible killing intent in her eyes, calmly asked, "What?" "I can let my father handle it." No, it's not that troublesome." Feng waved his hand and said with a grin, "I'm just thinking about which actor is better to ask for the lead role in the next 3 movies. The White Queen was obviously stunned for a moment, but she didn't expect that Feng's so-called trouble was this trouble. The killing intent in her eyes converged, and she didn't mean to delve into it, and said casually, "I see. That black actor named Smith Weir is good." "That's him." Feng settled on the spot and did not mean to continue the topic. He didn't want the White Queen to notice about S.H.I.E.L.D. affairs. "Father's side, I will say, I am your woman, there is no reason not to support your career." The White Queen wiped her wrist, cleaned up the dining table, took out a gift box from the room, and handed it to Feng. "What is it?" Feng slowly opened it, and inside was an expensive watch, and there were several diamonds on the surface, which was obviously a fake. "Christmas presents." The White Queen smiled slightly, and did not explain much, because the diamonds on this watch were all generated by their own mutant abilities, and they were accompanied by a wisp of telepathic spiritual power. If Feng was in any mortal danger, the diamonds would cover his whole body to protect him. If the watch is directly destroyed, she can also receive the induction in the first place. Christmas. Isn't there still a week left? Feng didn't ask much and put the watch on his wrist, but soon he reacted, this may be what the White Queen specially gave him for self-defense. After all, the White Queen's ability is diamond change. Thinking of this, Feng felt a little more warmth in his heart, smiled and put his arm around the White Queen's waist, and said, "My dear, what gift do you want? I will prepare it for you." How can you give someone a gift and ask someone for something? The White Queen snorted lightly, stretched out her finger and flicked Feng's head, turned around and walked into the kitchen. "I like everything you sent." Feng was stunned, smiled helplessly, and the love in his eyes deepened a little. The next day, early in the morning, a shocking prompt suddenly sounded in Feng's brain. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully releasing Die Hard and receiving a reward, nanoscale immortal body. Brief, this reward is the nano-immortal body of the protagonist in Blood Warrior. Blood Warrior? Nanoscale immortal body? Feng was stunned for a moment. This was the first time he had heard of this reward, but the movie, it's not that he hasn't seen it. The tough guy played by Vin Diesel has always been one of the starring candidates for action movies in Feng's heart. However, he is not very interested in this reward. Immortal body? Sounds pretty good, but for him now, it is not of much use. When the system first woke up, Feng would still be a little excited, but over time, he lost interest and focused all his energy on making movies. He doesn't plan to save the world, so what is he in a hurry to become stronger? Now life is quite good, sharing a bed with the White Queen every day, isn't it fragrant? Thinking of his intimate and charming wife, the corners of Feng's mouth couldn't help but curl. Jingle bells. The phone suddenly rang. Feng glanced at the number, and lazily pressed connect. "Boss, the company has been registered, and you need to come over here to do the procedures for legal persons." "Okay, I'll come right over." Hanging up the phone, Feng cleaned up, and after making out with the White Queen for a while as usual, he drove out. After Feng left, 2 men walked into the villa without anyone finding them. One of them pushed a wheelchair and the other sat in a wheelchair. The man in the wheelchair narrowed his eyes when he saw the figure in the living room that seemed not surprised by their arrival. "Emma, we've been looking for you for a long time." Professor X looked calmly at the White Queen and said, "So?" The White Queen looked at the two indifferently, playing with diamond crystals like Newtonian fluids on her fingers. Seeing this scene, Wolverine subconsciously blocked in front of Professor X's side, showing a defensive look. "It seems that you are more proficient in controlling your abilities." Professor X smiled gently and said, "When your mother brought you to see me, I thought, she's not my mother." The White Queen suddenly felt a chill skyrocketing, and her voice was several decibels higher. Good, calm down. Professor X raised his hand and pressed against the White Queen. The latter was stunned, and a flash of incredulity flashed in his eyes. She felt that her brain, including her body, calmed down at that moment. Obviously, this is Professor X's trick. The reason why I came to Mosa City to find you this time is not to take you back to the mutant school. Professor X propped his chin and said softly, you shouldn't know that the underground emperor of Mosa City is a mutant called Rampage, right? Mutants? The White Queen wrinkled her beautiful eyes and said, what does it matter to me? It's really none of your business. Professor X shrugged his shoulders and said, but he seems to be interested in the man next to you. Swoosh, moment. The killing intent on the White Queen's body skyrocketed. Don't get excited. Professor X's eyes fluctuated, and he raised his hand and said helplessly, we have already gone to the violent territory and warned him for you. Don't expect me to thank you. The White Queen sneered and said, I still remember the scene where you controlled me in order to suppress my ability. Sorry, Emma. Professor X pushed his wheelchair to the floor-to-ceiling window, looked at the flower bed in the villa, and muttered, everyone makes mistakes, and I am no exception. I'm not here to ask you for credit, but to remind you that the world, it seems to be starting to recover. The White Queen did not speak. I've been messing up my brain lately. Professor X rubbed his temples, his tone became a little serious, and said, the plan I proposed with Magneto has completely failed. We can't control the constant outflow of mutants, and those evil, uncontrolled guys are likely to make a mess of this world. Even they will strike at you and my kind. Then let them come. A flash of disdain flashed in the White Queen's beautiful eyes, and she said lightly. Professor X smiled wryly and asked, what if the one named Feng is also one of them? Click. An ice pick-like diamond blade instantly levitated above Professor X's head.